Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. My name is Brandon, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. Today, I'm joined by Representative Larry Don Suckla, who in his first year in the State House has proven to be an outspoken freedom fighter and liberty leader. Well, Representative Suckla, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, sir.
Well, 2025 was one of the most controversial years in history for the Colorado Legislature. So let's start with the big picture. What's the most important thing people need to know?
That we need to change a course. Uh, I think the budget might be the first thing. We talked about having a balanced budget, and it's going to be balanced for 2 or 3 months, and then we're going to be way in the hole, way in the hole. There was no let's not do this and let's not do that, because we know what's coming. I think that the state of Colorado, when it comes to as far as financially, is going to be in a world of hurt, and we're going to be off the budget by maybe $3 billion. I don't know what it's going to be. It's going to be bad.
Wow. And is that due to losing federal funding?
No, I wouldn't say it's from they're using the money in the wrong places. As far as I'm concerned, the state of Colorado has more money than it needs as far as at the state level. It's using the money in the wrong places, prioritizing the wrong things. And if we could ever get any common sense up there, it would be very easy to balance that budget. In fact, I think there would be a big surplus.
And it's so frustrating as a taxpayer, right? Like I grew up in a, middle class household, not to paraphrase a former presidential candidate, but I know how it is to live on a tight budget. You know what I mean? Where parents are figuring out how they're going to plan meals out for the week, for the month, and it's so frustrating for so many working families in Colorado that we work so hard to pay our bills, to balance our budgets, and then we see the state government, these legislators, driven by this ideological agenda to spend our hard-earned money on all these projects that really only benefit a few people, but we all have to pay for it.
That is 100% correct. You are spot on. Um, I got to be honest. For me, I have never been in a room, be it committee or in the chambers, have the witnesses, especially in the committees, up for hours testify on why this is good or bad, mostly bad, and think that every member that's in there, whether Republican or Democrat, will get it, and then they will vote just the opposite of whatever was common sense. I've never seen anything like that in my life until I got this job.
Wow. Yeah. It seems like so much of the legislation we see at the Capitol every year is predetermined. These special interest lobbyists and other interested parties are working with these legislators weeks, months, years even before the session starts. And they already have all these plans put together to spend our money and restrict our rights. And it's so unfortunate because the people are left out of the discussion, right? I've been trying to encourage people to go to committee hearings, to speak out, to get involved with the legislators. But, the regular person doesn't have a chance when it comes to fighting back against all the lobbyists and all these special interest groups who have the ear and are patting the pockets of some of these legislators.
So it's interesting what you said, because when I first got elected, and then they took us up, I call it the brainwashing session, where they go up there and they teach you what's going on. This is what they do: is they give you a bunch of pastries and donuts and a bunch of coffee, and they put you on a sugar high. And after about an hour, whatever the timing is, that's when they go, in my opinion, and try to do the brainwashing. The problem they had with me is I don't eat donuts, so they're not going to get me. But as far as what you was talking about, the second reading in the chamber, it was exactly what you're talking about. So it doesn't matter how many amendments one side or the other runs. They have a list up there, and it's already predetermined on how the vote is going to be. And it's very frustrating to be on the losing side. To be honest with you, I've never been in a situation where for 5 months we've lost at almost everything. It's hard to lose every single day, and I wish that the people would come to the conclusion that if we need to start having a government that is more equal and not so lopsided, it would be the best for both parties if that was to ever take place.
Definitely, things are very out of balance, that's for sure. So, what surprised you? What were some of your biggest surprises as a first year lawmaker?
I would say uh, just the way that everything functions and runs. I think they try to do a year's worth of work in 5 months. I wish that we could go to be like New Mexico, where it's, I think, 2 months. I think that the less time that the legislators are in that capital, the better off the people of Colorado are going to be. Um, Back to the second session, on the third reading, we push a button. Yes, green is yes, and red is no. And I have no idea why we don't. Well, I do have an idea why on the second reading we don't push that button either. It takes less time to push that button than it does to have a yay or nay voice vote, which does not matter. Or if there's a division called, you stand up, and that doesn't matter because the Democrats, all they need is 33 Democrats in there. And so we need all the Republicans because there's 22 of us. So you could have of the 43 of them, or yeah, it's 43. If they've got 10 gone, which they will, that's fine. They can still win. And so, what are those 10 doing that aren't in the room? That's a good question. If you had to push the button, then they've got to be in there because your name is recorded up on that wall.
Right. No, that's a fair point. It's, watching the Colorado channel and watching the proceedings throughout the year and that second reading vote, it's always that voice vote. So yeah, sometimes you hear one or two yays and a really loud a bunch of no's. But of course it doesn't really make a difference because like you said, it was already predetermined.
I think when you ask that question also is they would do all these bills, and I'm like, where did they come up with that bill? So I happen to be one of the legislators that I didn't have a bunch of lobbyists reach out to present a bill, and I think that's because right after I got elected, I got a lot of emails, and I got a lot of asks to do Zoom calls with different lobbying groups. And to be honest with you, I think I talked to 6 lobbyists before I set foot in that chambers. And some of my colleagues said, "You've only talked to 6." They said, "We've had over 100 talk to us." So I came in there flat-footed. I actually had a strategy. I wanted to jump in the swimming pool and learn how to swim. After I jumped in, I felt like if I could find my own way, that maybe I would find a different way that was and it was tough. Most of the legislators have 2 aides. I had one, which was my daughter. They said your aide is somebody you have to trust, and I about burned her out because I only had one when the majority had 2 or 3.
Wow. Well, definitely appreciate all your efforts this year. It's pretty exciting actually what you're able to accomplish. You were actually able to get 2 of your bills passed that will marginally increase the liberty of Coloradans. House Bill 1281, allowing Coloradans to title, register, and drive. Is it K vehicles or key vehicles? Don't know how you
K
say
K
that.
K vehicles.
K vehicles, and then of course House Bill 1121, the permanent trailer registration. What can you tell us about these 2 bills?
So after I got elected, they said you have to have 3 bills in by a certain amount of time. It was sometime in December. And to be honest with you, I hadn't thought about one bill. To be honest with you, I did not on running bills, but taking bills away, repealing bills, because I believe that we have too many. The way that I look at the bills is say that there was 600 that was passed this year. If you would use the analogy of a child in school, a first grader, and the teacher came and says, "I'm going to give you 500 rules, and you need to learn all these rules, and the rules are going to be this year." And then when they get on second grade, you're going to tell them, "Okay, I'm going to give you 500 more rules." We have too many laws in the state of Colorado, and we need to get rid of a bunch of them. And so that was the analogy I took. Well, my wife and I sit and drink coffee on the couch every morning before we start our day and go to work. And we came up with what can we do that would give more freedoms to the people of Colorado. And the trailer bill, a couple of my bills didn't get passed. They got PI'd, but they all had to do with giving more freedoms to the people and less regulation.
That's great. No, that's definitely what we need. Like you said, way too many bills. We got to repeal them. And it's incredible too, just to think about. I mean, how many bills were presented this year? It was something around the lines of, you know, I mean, thousands of, or 1,200 bills or so like that were introduced this year, or 733, excuse me. There was rumors of 1,200, but I just pulled it up. 733 bills introduced this year. I mean, how do you keep track? How do you keep track of all the bills that are being introduced? I mean, do people really take the time to read them and understand what they're voting on?
I love that question. So the second week that I was there, there was about 120 bills that had already been introduced, and I spent the weekend reading those bills. And then I realized that that was the wrong strategy because I couldn't keep up. They just started coming so fast. And so what I did is I picked legislators, Republicans, that were an expert in that field. So say if it was education, there's somebody that they're very conservative and they're very knowledgeable in education. And I would lean on them when it came to be an educational bill. If it was a medical bill, there was also another representative that was very knowledgeable about medicine and doctors and such. And so I would lean on them and I would ask them, are you voting yes or no? And why? Sometimes I didn't vote the same way they did, but a lot of times I did based on the way that they described why they thought it was good or bad. Because there's no human being, in my opinion, that is smart enough to know everything that we are voting on. So you
That's
have
a
to find.
fair, no, exactly. Fair point. 120 days, 733 bills. I mean, there's no possible way to really understand the nuance and the details and how this is going to affect the bigger picture of our state. I mean, there's so many unintended consequences and sometimes really bad intended consequences that come from some of this legislation, and the lawmakers who are voting on these don't know it at the time.
Mhm. Well, one of my main issues, and I think you already know this, is the internet and the freedom of the internet. And there were some bills that were introduced that had to do with censorship of the internet. And where I live is extremely rural, and the only thing that can put us on par, even to attempt to put us on par with the city, is the internet. We can have people live where I live, and they can work and make a living with the internet. So we've seen what happened to Trump. They kicked him off of Twitter. We've seen what happened if you would write something negative about a mask during COVID years or the shot, how you would be censored. And so I'm a very avid opponent for the internet freedom. It's the last wild, wild west thing that we have.
No, I definitely appreciate that. It was unfortunate to see so many lawmakers, and unfortunately, a few Republicans kind of jump on board with more government regulation of the internet. And I mean, what a scary thing. Sure, it's of course they say it's only going to affect people breaking the law, but then when you look at the 700 laws they're introducing, the hundreds that end up passing, and more laws every year. Well, heck, you could be breaking the law, not doing anything. So not doing anything wrong. So it's a scary, scary idea that the government can control who can use social media, who can access the internet, and how the government's going to monitor and control our behavior online.
Every law that was passed that had to do with censorship of the internet, the subject matter is already against the law. So as far as I'm concerned, they're irrelevant. And what will happen is once you start with one thing, well, we're going to censor this, they could go all the way to jaywalking. Well, you jaywalk, so now we're going to censor you on the internet. So it's a very slippery slope, and it's something that's got to be fought against, in my opinion, tooth and nail to the bitter end.
Wonderful. Great to hear it. And definitely we need more proponents of internet freedom up there at the state capitol for sure. Another big issue, of course, this year was guns. So many attacks on our Second Amendment rights. Absolutely outrageous. I mean, did any of this, did it surprise you how bold they were, how far they went, or what were your impressions of the anti-gun bills that passed
Well,
this
so
year?
I'll describe one. I I'm a big Second Amendment opponent. So I can tell you the first one that happened was where they wanted to raise where you can buy ammo to 21 from 18. I sat in that committee and I listened to kids that were 16, 17 years old that the Denver schools buses in to try to convince you to vote yes, to censor their rights. That's how brainwashed they are, to where you don't need to buy the bullets until you're 21, but yet you can be handed a gun when you're 18. And their argument was, well, the brain is not fully developed till it's 25. That was what these kids were saying. And then the very next day after we have that, we have something about for some censorship of books in the schools, a whole different bill in the chambers. And they said, well, at 4 years old, your brain is developed at 80%. At 5 years old, your brain is developed to 90%. So their analogy then the day before on the gun bill was It takes 20 years to gain that extra 10%, but yet the world champion chess master is 17. It's ridiculous.
Right. And I always thought too, if the brain's so underdeveloped until you're 25 or so, then why are we letting these young people vote, right?
That was brought up in the committee as well. None of it made sense. There was no common sense. I have no idea why the Democrats, after listening to hours and hours of positive testimony of why something was bad, would then turn around and vote against the common sense solution. That was one of the hardest pills to swallow, I guess, up there.
Right. That there was no good faith argument. There was no way to convince them otherwise. They're driven by an agenda, elected to serve that agenda, funded to push that agenda out on Colorado. And it's so sad. And I'm glad that people are hopefully starting to wake up to it now and really starting to understand just how bad it is down there.
It's awful. I don't know how else to describe it. It's not at all what was in my mind after I won what it was going to be like. And you're in a building that is absolutely just the Taj Mahal of buildings. It's beautiful. You should be proud of that building. But the things that happen inside of that beautiful building is disgusting, and it's just heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking is definitely the right word, especially when it comes to attacks on families. I mean, we saw probably the most controversial bill of the year, and hard to believe there were so many controversial bills, but the one that really stands out for a lot of people is 1312, which is the bill basically where parents could lose custody of their kids during a custody dispute if they didn't play along with a gender transition scheme perpetrated upon these kids. What can you tell us about that whole fiasco?
Oh, it was awful. It was awful. So it was basically what they're doing is they're taking away parental rights. And as far as I'm concerned, until you're 18 years old, you're under the direction of the parent. And this analogy, or that they talk about a village raises the child. No, that a village doesn't raise my child. My wife and my daughter raise our child, and so they was. You can have teachers that this stupid transgender. There's only two sexes. It's a male and a female. It's just that simple. You can't be a man and have a baby. And if you want to become a or try to say that you're going to be a girl when you're really a man, you do that in your own home. I guess I'm more libertarian. Go ahead. I don't. That's. But when you go put it on our children, then now you have crossed the line, and that's what they did. They did the stupid thing called dead naming, where anybody can say that they're whoever they want to be, and you have to legally call them that. I can't do it. I cannot call. I cannot go along with the ideology. If you are that stupid and mentally health impaired, that you have a mental problem, and it needs to be looked at. But I'm not going to go along with your mental health problems. And to listen to that one, and the other one was the transgender health care bill. I think it was HB 251309, where you could come from anywhere in the world, and you can spend $500,000 on plastic surgery to try to become something that you're never going to really be. And then yet Representative Dusty Johnson, she got up there and talked about her right before they did the final vote on that bill. And she talked about how she had cancer in her knee, and they told her they wanted to cut her leg off. She couldn't get the surgery, couldn't afford it. And what she had to do to go through and that is a very strong woman. In fact, most people don't know this, but after she gave that speech, she went in and off into Vanessa's room, the side room, and I didn't know why. And then she came and sat down. I sit by her, and she kept taking her glasses off. She was crying. It was a very emotional time of life for her, because she thought they were going to cut her leg off. She's going to die from cancer. And yet she couldn't get the money for something that is real and needed. But yet the way that law passed, somebody that thinks that they are something that they're not is going to get up to $500,000 or whatever it costs for plastic surgery is just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Definitely, that's 100% the right word for it. I mean, to circle back earlier, our we work so hard as Colorado families, workers, people out there away from their kids, away from their homes, just to provide a living wage or provide a paycheck, for their families. And at the same time, then we have the government sending all of our money, all of our taxpayer money to these types of programs. It is absolutely ridiculous. It's horrific and so wrong on so many levels. But ultimately, I think it's really that attack on kids that is really firing people up. We're seeing, thankfully, now we're seeing some pastors stand up. We're seeing a lot more people get involved, and parents are being affected by these types of policies across Colorado. So I'm really hopeful that there's going to be more of an awakening, more people standing up, more people speaking out, more people getting involved. What do you think about people getting involved? Do you think where's the best opportunity for people to have an impact, to have a voice? And are you optimistic about where Colorado can go if enough people do stand up?
So I am. I really believe that we're still a red state. When I was a county commissioner, the way that it's set up at the state level, when you are on those committees at a county commissioner level, it's one county, one vote. There's 64 counties, that's 64 votes. So somebody that comes from a county like Dolores County, which is one of the counties I represent, has the same voting power as Jefferson County. And it was a very good system. Well, when they put the map in order of the 64 counties, I can't remember back then, but it was around 50 or 51 of those counties are red. And it's just that small, well, it's not small, the city of Denver that has the 5 million or whatever is the voice for all of these red counties. And I believe there's awakening. And I believe that there's some things we can do. We need to record the Zoom meetings in the committee hearings, because that's where the Democrats say some very stupid things, that they're communists, that they're socialists, that they, abortion up until after they come out. They say some very horrible things, and if the public could just see those things and then run some very good candidates that have backbone and will fight for the people and care more about the people than getting reelected, we could turn this place around and make it a great place, because we live in the most beautiful state in the nation, as far as I'm concerned. And it's worth fighting for. I hear, well, we're just going to go somewhere else, or, we'll succeed. I remember, I'm like, no, we're going to stay put. We love this state of Colorado. It's worth fighting for. And we need to get more people that are in the churches to vote. They have got to get involved, because they are taking away their religious freedoms right and left. We've got to get more gun owners involved in voting, and people that have never voted that are out there. In my community alone, I know so many people I run into that are very good people, but they've never voted, and they need to wake up and realize that that's how they can change their lives. It's not about them; it's about our children. It's our children's future that we're fighting for.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it seems like so few people know what's actually happening down there in the state legislature. The media will only cover a 30-second soundbite about something, present a very one-sided view, and people don't realize so much of what's happening down there and how they're chipping away at our freedoms, how they're chipping away at our paychecks, how they're doing all these horrible things to our lives and the lives of future generations for sure. What do you think what's one of the big stories, or one of the things that happened this session, maybe some of the legislation that people aren't aware of? We talked about the transgender, the guns. Those were definitely the big headline stories, but what other legislation went through that maybe was underreported or that people need to know more about?
Well, there's just so much, Brandon. Back before I answer that question, it's people like you that are making the difference. It's people like you with your podcast that are telling the truth, and we're getting away from the ABC networks that give us disinformation, or they won't report on something because it goes against their ideology. And so the people aren't getting what the truth. It's people like you that is putting the truth out there. And I think that's going to be the future. That's our news now. These liberal newspapers and these self-serving news organizations, they've got to go. They have got to be buried. And you people that are doing what you're doing has got to take over. They did some things that to counties. So I was on the transportation, local affairs, excuse me, transportation, local affairs, um, and on that local government, and on that committee, they did some building codes bills. And what they did is the way that it's always worked is each county. So where I live, for example, there's no building codes. So there's a handful of counties left that don't have the building codes. What we do have is we have a state um, plumbing inspection, and we have a state electrical inspection. But other than that, you're freer to build. So it's cheaper to build here just because of that. And when I walked in the room, one of the first things for the first month was talked about was affordable housing, this and affordable housing that. Well, my answer to that question is there is no such thing as affordable housing today in Colorado, period. What there is subsidized housing. That's what they're talking about, but they try to use words to make it sound better than what it really is. And the way that that you solve that problem, because this is a problem that is solvable, the affordable housing crisis. And what the way that we solve that is I went to large developers and I asked them, how can we make housing cheaper? Because our kids can't afford to buy these homes like I did when I was younger. And they gave me this saying, and the saying was, you buy whiskey by the barrel, you sell it by the shot. You buy land by the acres and you sell it by the lot. So it's the land prices that is one of the main things that developers do that's how they make their money. They need to buy the land as cheap as possible. And there is no cheap land in Colorado close to where they're wanting to do their so-called affordable housing projects because it's extremely expensive land. And then the second thing that costs so much is the infrastructure, the roads and the water and the electricity to get to these lots to build these. So the solution to that is we're either going to have to take some buildings that are in Denver and repurpose them into housing because they've already got the infrastructure there. But the problem with that is there were so many bills that was passed that in the end, they want every home to be handicap accessible in the state of Colorado. And that is a $30,000 increase in the building of a home. And the way that I look at that is if you want to have a home that is handicap accessible, then that's your purview and you go ahead and build one. But if you are 21 years old and you don't care if you have stairs or whatnot, then you should be able to build something that has stairs. It's the same thing with the same analogy as Obamacare. They wanted all of the young people that didn't need the health insurance to pay for the people that did need the health insurance. And they're on a trajectory that's just going to make houses more unaffordable as we go along and more expensive.
Yeah, that's a great point. All these regulations, all these controls, it's not doing anything to really lower the prices. And I really like what you said there that it's subsidized housing in lieu of affordable housing because yeah, they're forcing other people to pay for it. I mean,
Mhm.
it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and unfortunately, that's so often what happens down there. As we know, the government doesn't generate wealth; they don't produce anything. All they can do is take wealth, take money from productive people, and shuffle it over to their friends or to non-productive people or to all these different areas of society that don't necessarily produce anything for the rest of the state. So unfortunate, and that's like you said, that leads us to ruin. That's kind of this socialist mindset, and it's wild how bold they are and how they have this vision that they can just totally redesign our entire society. The politicians down there listening to them talk, they feel like they're the smartest people in the world, that they can just totally re-engineer, reimagine our society and create this perfect utopia instead of letting people make their own decisions, instead of letting people make their own choices, instead of letting people keep their own money. If we just give enough of our money and enough of our freedom away, they'll figure it all out and create this perfect utopia. I mean, it's absolutely crazy.
Well, you made me think of the medical profession. We had a lot of bills that had to do with medicine, and they call it healthcare. And they just healthcare. So I'm going to give you. I don't believe that it's called healthcare. Healthcare, in my opinion, is a pair of running shoes, a bike, a hard worker, somebody that eats good, Um, that is healthcare. Now we need to be calling it medical care, and medical care is when you're sick and you need a medication. So if we concentrate more on healthcare and actually keeping the people from getting sick in the first place, we would be in a better position when it comes to medical care. And boy, I'd get in lots of fights over that. But and there's a way. So most people don't know this. I had a doctor that helped me when I was running to get reelected. And I said, how do we make healthcare? I called it healthcare, and there she straightened me out. No, it's medical care. How do we make medical care more affordable? And she told me that you shop around. So say that the doctor gives you a medication and you go to Walgreens and it's $100. You might be able to go across the street to the Safeway and that same medication is $40. And people need to know that. They need to have that choice of which pharmacy to go to, and then they need to shop around like they do anything else. They don't go to the first car dealership and buy the car. They shop around to try to find the cheapest car. And same thing with medical exams. So I think she said a mammogram, if I'm saying that right, is around $1,000 here in Colorado. Well, you can go to Arizona and it's $110. So that's a 900% increase in Colorado versus, you could get on the plane. It costs $200 to fly there and back. Those are the kind of things that we need to do to help with medical care. People that do need the medicines, that do have a chronic disease and need that care. But I just can't stand that they make young people pay for it that are actually living a lifestyle that is health care. They're taking care of themselves and eating correct.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, competition definitely lowers prices, giving people more options, allowing the medical community to compete with each other would definitely be huge in terms of lowering those prices. But of course, we know all the regulations, all the restrictions that the government puts upon them makes it so hard for new businesses to spring up to try and serve those health needs. And I really like what you said there about medical care versus healthcare. And I think that's a great distinction there for sure. You know, we got to kind of shift that mindset. Uh, get really good stuff.
Well,
But I
one
gotta
of the
say,
other
yeah,
mindsets is insurance. So I think that's the next biggest crisis in Colorado, and that is going to be our insurance, whether it is medical insurance or whether it is home insurance or commercial insurance. And that is, as we passed so many bills that through that committee that went on and passed in the Senate and in the House that made one of the bills. They said, well, we're going to raise the price of auto insurance so that we can make it cheaper. That was the analogy from the Democrat. And I just sat there and was shaking my head. You're going to increase the price of the insurance to make it cheaper? That's how they think. It's I have no words for why
yeah,
they.
I saw that one. Well, that was when I tracked throughout the session there. Yeah, and it was, of course, because it's so convoluted and it's so Orwellian, and unfortunately, the media plays along with this so much because what they're going to do is, they're going to add a fee to everybody's car insurance that these insurance companies are going to be forced to collect from us. Turning them into agents of the state. Of course, they raise our insurance rates, and then they're going to use that money for vulnerable road users. So they're going to have the separated bike lanes. They're going to have, roundabouts, whatever. They're going to have crosswalks, this and that. And then somewhere down the road, who knows when, at some point, it's going to lower the cost of car insurance because it'll have stopped all of those accidents from happening at some indeterminate time in the future. And eventually prices will come down. I mean, it's so ridiculous, so utopian. And then we had the homeowners insurance doing the same thing where we're going to increase everybody's home insurance by an amount. And then they're going to use that to help fund, resilient roof systems and all this wildfire mitigation stuff, which will lower insurance rates for those people up in the mountains. And it's like, but everybody else has to pay for it, of course. You know what I mean? So it's a total scheme. And then you just see the headline in the Denver Post or somewhere else where it says, oh, Bill killed that would have lowered insurance costs. And it's like it take you 30 seconds to actually read the bill and know that it's not going to increase insurance costs in the immediate future. It's just the marketing points. And the media just plays right along with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Our insurance already is too much, and anything that you add on there now, all of a sudden, one of the bills also had to do with our RTD, and I have a difference of opinion there. First of all, this is from Ken DeGraff. Their buses are too big; they need to be half that size. when somebody came to testify, he said, I rode the bus, and it was another transportation issue. And I asked him, how many people was on that bus? And he said, well, I would say it's 25% full. Well, then why are we driving these huge buses around Denver that are only half full? Why don't you have buses that are half the size? They would get better fuel mileage. And then the other thing is the guy says, well, me and my wife, we only have one car, and that's why I need the public transportation. Well, I believe, and I know that it's down the road here, but I believe that someday Elon Musk is going to figure it out, and we're going to have a car that will drive you to be a witness, and then he'll go back. The car will go back and go get your wife and take her to the grocery store or whatever. And I believe that someday, soon, that's going to happen. There was another bill and there was a Republican on it that had to do with cell towers and mandatory government approval within 120 days. And we all know, I brought it up in the committee, that July 7th, Starlink is going to be able to, you'll be able to get a phone call on your Apple phone or your Android starting July 7th. So these cell towers that they want to spend, I think there was $91 million left. In my opinion, in 4 or 5 years is going to start to be irrelevant. It's all going to be coming off of the satellite. So why are we spending all this money to improve cell reception in rural communities? To be honest with you, I have a ranch that for 30 minutes, you have no cell reception. And to be honest with you, that might be the best part of my day. So.
No, I mean, what a perfect analogy for government versus like the private market or the free market and entrepreneurs. You have entrepreneurs and people out there creating solutions to give people the ability to use a car for multiple purposes or to get cell phone coverage out anywhere out there. And then you have the government, who of course is not only making it harder on those people, but then propping up all the older technology and all these older systems in
Yes.
place that of course have their special interest lobbyists down there making sure that their ways, their rules continue to be perpetuated for infinity. Yeah, and it's so unfortunate.
They're doubling down on the outdated technology. That's how ignorant they are.
Yeah, exactly. Such a perfect example. We saw regulations against artificial intelligence, these last 2 years down at the state capitol. We've seen there was a bill, I don't know if it ended up passing, where it said any driverless vehicle would have to have somebody in it to ensure that there's not an accident. Like, you have to have somebody who could be a backup driver if there was, because they're trying to do commercial like semis and stuff like that without drivers, just this driverless type of cars like the Elon Musk stuff you were talking about. And of course, here comes the government saying, well, hold on a second. We have to make sure we're letting you decide, we're going to decide what you can and can't do in our society. And it just slows that whole process down. I mean, yeah, it's no wonder that these politicians, I mean, ultimately they're just making us more impoverished as a society and holding us back from new technologies.
Mm-hmm. The best thing government can do is provide the basic services and then get the hell out of the way.
Yeah, I love it. Exactly. Well said, sir. And I want to talk about one of the most underreported news stories of the year, and that was towards the end of the session. Several female legislative aides complained that a man was using their restroom and invading their private space. What can you tell us about what happened with that?
Well, they were shut down by the speaker, so they filed a complaint. They kept putting them off about the complaint, and it happened to be over in the building where all of our offices are, part Democrat and part Republican. The bathroom on the 6th floor is on the Democrat side, and these girls would go to the bathroom. There's a whole story to this. So Marshall, is his aide, and I believe that he came out against transgender last year, and he got hurt on it. And I believe that he might have hired that aide to try to make amends with the tranny community. And so that's where it started. Well, this aide would wait till these girls, young, out of high school or, first or second year of college, would go to the bathroom and then follow them in the bathroom. And so it made them very uncomfortable. They filed a complaint. And then it got worse. Then the transgender guy, he filed a complaint, and his concerns were addressed right away, and his feelings were hurt. Well, what about the feelings of those three young ladies? There was more than three, by the way. There's three that came up forward, but there were several more. There was an aide that said, "I can't do it anymore," and worked in the Capitol, moved over and worked in the Capitol. So um, it was what it is if it's transgender, their feelings matter. But if you're a young lady, it doesn't matter to me. And the Democrat position is we're the ones for women's rights. And I could tell you that they are the opposite of the ones for women's rights. If they were for women's rights, then they would stop these men competing in sports. If they were from women's rights, they would stop these men from going into the bathrooms of women's bathrooms. So it's the Republican side and the libertarian side that is for women's rights. Guns is the same thing. You can't take a 110-pound woman up against a 200-pound man and think that woman's going to be able to take care of herself. That you hand her a gun and now she's equal. I call guns an equalizer for women. So it happened in the state where all this transgender BS is, and it happened at the highest level at the Capitol. It is underreported, and it needs to be out there. People need to know about how scared these girls were and how uncomfortable. The transgender guy started stalking them. He would stalk them to the Capitol. You've been in that Capitol. You know it is hard to get away from people, but there is corners of that Capitol that you can go to, and they would go to these places to try to get away from him, and he would follow them.
Wow. Wow. And from what I understand, to make matters worse, these young women were retaliated against. Is that accurate?
Well, they were told that I want to make sure I get this straight, that they might lose their jobs. The thing about that though is they work for the state representatives. So how can the speaker or leadership fire somebody that actually works for an individual representative? They scared them. This is a great learning opportunity for somebody at that age. They're going to be our future politicians, a lot of them, and they're going to go out there into a community. I'm using my daughter for an example. She comes home and she talks about government and what she's seen and what she learned and how we can make a difference to her friends that have never seen that or had that opportunity to see that. So they need to be protected, and they weren't protected, all in this stupid ideology of people that think they're something that they're not, and it's disgusting.
Wow. Yeah, definitely disgusting is the right word. I mean, the idea that young women don't deserve to have some privacy, don't deserve to have a private space. I mean, that's like it's the exact opposite of all of our cultural norms and traditions going back hundreds, if not thousands of years. I mean, this is a foundation of just human interactions that people need to have their privacy. We let people of different sexes or genders or whatever, have their own spaces, and to totally try and circumvent that, subvert that. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it just shows how upside down things have become down at the state capitol.
One thing I could say at the state capitol, and for some reason, I don't know why this is the way that people think, but they think that the more bills that they have, somehow they have did something better for the people. And you think of Billy the Kid, where he had 21 notches, meaning he had killed 21 people or whatever, and that was. But for me, it's just the opposite. It's not how many bills you have; it is how many bills that you killed that were bad for the people. That is what the politicians, in my opinion, should be. That should be their number one goal. And for me, I had two bills. I can have five. There's some people that representatives had 40 some bills, and there's no way for all that you can keep track of that. There's no way that they are smart enough to come up with those ideas. So where did the ideas come from? And that's what's wrong with up there at the Capitol. Somebody else has got the auto pen, just like Biden did, and they're making the decisions, and the representatives are the carrier. And that's got to stop, in my opinion. And we need to lower the bill count. In fact, to be honest with you, I bet you the state of Colorado, if we canceled next year's session, we would be better off. Completely
Yes,
canceled.
100% guarantee there. Yeah, definitely should cancel it. How great would it be if Colorado met only every 2 years or something like that? It'd give the voters a chance to really say yes, we support or oppose what these politicians are doing. I think that'd be the right way to go. Definitely preserve our freedom. But Representative Sukla, what else do people need to know? Any final thoughts here?
I think that we need to record the Zoom meetings in the committees. I think we need to find good candidates to run against all of these representatives. You can find one to run against me. I don't care, but find good people and let's push them. Let's help them get elected, and let's change Colorado for the better. And let's have more freedoms for our kids. When I was in school, you could carry the gun in the back of the pickup in high school, and we did. We never had a shooting. When I was a kid, you could ride in the back of a pickup and not get in trouble. Now you can't even have a dog in the back of your pickup, it's animal abuse. And let's give them more freedoms and let them know what it's really like. Here where I'm at, I actually at my farm can open the door and shoot my gun. And I'm usually shooting at a prairie dog because he's wanting to come out of my field in my yard and dig a hole. And those are the kind of freedoms I'm talking about. Where I live, there's a lot of freedom. Medical issues, when you get sick where I live, somebody that works for Big O that makes $200 a day breaking tires will go to a benefit auction and buy a $500 pie so that person can help cover their medical bills for their medical expenses. That's what we got to get back to. And where I live, if you break down and you have a flat tire and you're a woman, you are going to have somebody stop and help you, and you can trust them. Where I live, they always like, we want those billionaires to come to Montezuma County and work, come in here. And I'm like, no, 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 let's leave them in Telluride. And we want the workers, because the workers are the ones that are the good people. The workers are the ones that are going to buy the baseball uniforms or whatever there is and help with the community expenses. So we need to get back to those things, and it'd be a better place. And let's have more freedoms to live our lives. And this, I got to tell you, I had no idea what I was getting into. I know how it works now, and I want to change it. We can change it if we all work together. People like you, people like me. There's so many good people on the Republican side, all working together. We need to do what the Democrats do. It's almost like they give them their marching orders, and they control those legislators individually if they're a Democrat. The problem we have as Republicans is we're so independent thinking that sometimes we do it to our peril. So you need to be independent thinking, but yet you need to work as a team. It's a team effort up there, and we need to become a very strong team.
Wonderful. Well, appreciate everything you do, sir. Please keep us updated if anything else needs to get out there to the public. But really appreciate all your efforts. Keep up the great work. Enjoy your time off, and hope to talk to you again soon.
It was a pleasure meeting you in person. I follow you on X, and you're doing a fantastic job. And don't let up on the throttle.
Appreciate that, sir. Thank you so much. Appreciate the kind words, and I'm sure we'll